Hi, today we're going to do a simple meatball recipe. What inspired me to do the meatballs, I had some leftover tomato sauce and I wanted to use it up. So this is a simple recipe. I just do 1 pound of ground beef. I have an onion, green onion that I'm going to chop finely and mix it in. Green onion's also optional, but I like green onion in beef. About a teaspoon of kosher salt. It's salt until you think it's correct, and about a half a teaspoon of black pepper. I also have garlic powder and Worcestershire sauce or Worcestershire sauce, and I'll just add a little of that also to add extra flavor to the beef. So the first thing I do is to chop the onion into fine little dice. And this is a quarter of an onion. And just remember to roll your fingers and just make thin slices. If you make thin slices and then you cut the other way, it will also be thin. So just gather it up and rock the knife. Also, if you have a little food processor or a mincer, that would also work. But for this little onion, sometimes it's not worth the effort to set it up and clean. So just gather it up and rock to the center and back. And how fine it is, it's basically your personal preference. Sometimes with meatballs, especially only 1 pound, I'll end up making smaller meatballs. So you don't want big chunks of onion. You don't want it to be like a meatloaf. It's optional. You could also add, if you want a lighter meatball, you could add breadcrumbs and egg. But again, that becomes more like a meatloaf, and some people like that because it adds some lightness to the meatball instead of coming out like a dense little burger patty. Now for the green onion, I typically like splitting it in half and just cut away. Okay, the onions are diced. I'll add that to the meat. Okay, in terms of salt, I'm just eyeballing it. About 3-4 pinches. This looks like enough black pepper. I'll keep this on the side in case I add more. You could use fresh garlic, but I had garlic powder. Just make sure everything gets a nice coating. And first the Worcestershire sauce. That's about a tablespoon. Now I just mix together. You could use your hand, but I'll use a spoon. All right, I'll use my hand. I'll add the rest of the salt. This is 80-20 ground beef I used. Okay, I think everything's thoroughly mixed, and now I'll make little meatballs. And I'm thinking about the size of a golf ball. So a little handful like that. Thing with ground beef, especially 80-20, they tend to shrink. So you don't want to make them too small unless that's your goal. Okay, now I'll go fry them and then put them in the tomato sauce to cook. I have 11, and what I'm gonna do to cook it is I preheating this pan over medium-high heat, and I think it's warm, so I'm gonna start browning the meatballs. Try to brown the sides of all sides of the meatball. Notice I'm using a cast iron pan that's dry. I found that if I add oil, sometimes it doesn't brown as quickly. And besides, this is 80-20 ground beef. It will produce oil itself. Alright, the meatballs have been going for about 5 minutes over medium-high heat. I just turned it down to sort of a medium heat. I'm going to add the sauce just to deglaze the pan and move this to a little saucepan to allow the meatballs to finish cooking. So I'm just going to add the sauce. Stir it around real quick and then move it to a saucepan. Alright, the meatballs have been cooking for 5 minutes. I just added the sauce to deglaze the pan, and I'm going to move the meatballs to a saucepan to allow it to finish cooking. One thing about cast iron, they say that you shouldn't use tomato sauce in a cast iron pan and allow it to simmer too long, because it's going to probably leach out some of the iron and also mess up the seasoning on the pan. So I'm going to transfer this to a saucepan and finish cooking. Alright, the meatballs have been added to the saucepan. I'm turned this down to medium low, and let it simmer for about 15-20 minutes to allow the meatballs to finish cooking. Alright, the meatballs have been cooking in this sauce for about 20 minutes. I'll give it one last stir, and I'll give it a taste test. Should be done. Hi, today I make a quick and easy meatball in tomato sauce using simple ingredients, and try not to make it too complicated. It's also low carb since I don't add any bread filling or breadcrumbs. Let's give it a try. So I've topped with a little Parmesan cheese and green onions. You could use parsley. Let's try one without the ingredients or the Parmesan. Let me try to get that. So here's what it looks on the inside after 20 minutes of cooking. Very nice. I think the sauce has adds a lot of flavor. One thing I notice, if you add breadcrumbs and do a filler, it'll probably smooth out the texture of the meatball. Right now, it has good flavor. The texture is a little coarse because of the ground beef, and that's all there is. Ground beef and onions. It would be nice on to use the meatballs if you could make a sandwich or a topping on pasta. And also, I imagine the more you leave this in the sauce, the more flavorful the meat will become as it absorbs the flavor of the sauce. So for a quick, simple, easy recipe, the results are pretty good. Enjoy.